Hello guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Natasha. If you are new here, welcome. Hello. If you're returning, welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing a recent reads wrap up. So I kind of saw a fellow YouTuber, I think it was Mel Reads. If you don't follow her already, I would definitely go recommend. She has a very vibrant personality and is just fun to watch. But anyways, I saw her do a recent reads wrap up instead of like a monthly wrap up. And because I only read 2 books in the month of February, I didn't feel like that was enough books, if that makes sense, to make a video about it. But since I read 6 books in the month of March, I figured that kind of combining those 2 together would be a good video for you guys. So I'm going to kind of go into the books that I read in February 1st and then into March. And I will say that I did just recently move, so I don't have all of the physical copies of the books that I read in March with me because I only could take a certain amount of books. And I wanted to take books that I hadn't read yet. For the most part, you know, I have to have some of my favorite books that I decided to keep with me. But to start this video, the first book that I started and finished in February was Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas. If you haven't heard of this book already, I would be kind of surprised because it's literally all over everything. I did end up getting the Barnes & Noble edition, and you can see that this book was well loved. I ended up taking it on a road trip to finish this book, and so she got some good loving, and I love a good well-read book. So anyways, don't mind my copy of it. And also, I will say it's been a very long time since I picked up this book, so I forgot how chunky this book is. And how many pages? Almost 800 pages. Anyways, so if you have not heard anything about this book, it essentially follows Bryce as a main character. So you follow her and her friend group in her perspective, her POV, and you kind of see how they are together, and then this major kind of murder event happens, and some of her closest people to her end up dying, and it completely tears her apart. You kind of see her start to break down, and this investigation starts on trying to figure out who killed some of her closest people, and then it jumps 2 years into the future, and another murder happens in the same way that her friends died. You get to see her and Athalar actually come together and be put together on this investigation to figure out who this murderer is and why it's been happening. It goes into a lot of detail. There's a romance in here, and it's just a very twisty, very, very good book. Like I said, I wrote this about a month ago, so I don't remember too much of the specifics. I did enjoy it, but it is a lengthy book, so sometimes it can be a little bit hard to get into, which I did hear from some other people that I know that did read this book as well. I highly recommend this series and just Sarah J. Maas's books in general. But anyways, yeah, I think I would rate this a 4.5. It goes into a lot of detail. There's just so many plot twists, and just following these 2 characters and seeing them grow and develop and learn these new things and figure out this overall plot of a murder mystery. And the end of the book gets so twisty and crazy because it kind of talks about hell, and they have these gates all over the city, and havoc just breaks loose. And so just watching how she developed into being a character that would be able to help in those situations was really cool to read about. So I would highly, highly recommend Crescent City and that whole series. I haven't read the rest of them yet, but I would recommend them. After that, I read the whole Inheritance game series. That is one of the set of books that I do not currently have with me, so I will put up some pictures right here of what the book covers look like. I will say that I have a whole reading series vlog about the Inheritance games and everything, so I won't go too into depth about the books, but essentially it follows this main character, Avery, and she gets put into the will of a really old very wealthy man, and he ends up dying, and she gets called from school to this will. So she ends up going to this big estate and meeting these people that were his family and wondering, why me? Why did I get picked? I don't know this man. I've never heard of this man. I don't think I'm related to you. So how did I get picked to be a part of this guy's will? You follow Avery, and you also follow 4 brothers that were the man's grandsons. And the man loved puzzles and games and riddles. Essentially, he lays out this big set of puzzles for Avery and the brothers to figure out why she was put into this will. And the amount of plot twists that is laid out in this book by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, it's actually crazy to see that it was a YA and it has that much kind of detail. Like, the amount of thought that would have had to gone into developing a book that has games and puzzles and riddles, and the amount of creativity that goes into creating that, and also the fact that Jennifer Lynn Barnes herself was the one that actually created all of those puzzles and linked them together, because throughout the 3 books there's puzzles from the first and second book that relates to the third book, and it's all intertwined. And so I think that with each book I went from a 3.75, and then the second book was a 4.25, and then the third book was a 4.5. And I was going to rate the third book a 5 stars, and then the ending fell flat for me. Like, I was just like, oh, that's how the book's finished. So I was a little disappointed in that, if I'm being honest. But other than that, it's a very fast-paced YA read. I loved the different games and puzzles that were in this book, and overall it is like a 4.25 rating for the series. So I would highly recommend that book series. It was really enjoyable to read. I binged it. Like I said, I have a reading vlog that should be coming out somewhat in the near future of my in-depth thoughts about that whole series, so I would definitely go recommend watching that. After reading the Inheritance game series, I read The Perfect Marriage by Jeneva Rose, and in between starting and finishing that book, I also read Behind You by Rylie Dark. So I guess I'll go into Behind You first. I read that pretty quickly. I started it late at night and then I finished it the next day. So it was a super quick read. It follows this main character, Haley. She's an FBI investigator for murders, and she has her partner. She ends up getting called out with her partner to this town, trying to figure out this whole situation and find these little clues and figure out who out of the entire town could possibly be the killer for this and what's the reasoning behind it. And it actually gets pretty fast paced. Like I said, it's a really short book, so you kind of have to move the story along pretty quickly, so it is a super fast paced read. I think I would probably rate it 3.25. It's just kind of a filler book, I guess. But like I said, I was also reading The Perfect Marriage by Jeneva Rose, and so it's following this married couple, and starts off the book kind of showing you that their relationship isn't that great. She's a high-class defense attorney, and she's hardly ever at home, and she's always at work and always has cases to work on. And he is kind of a struggling writer who's always at home, always wishing that she was there, and she just is a workaholic. And they end up getting this cabin out in the woods. That's where he goes to do his writing. And instead of doing writing, he decides to have a mistress on the side because his marriage is unfulfilling for him. Kind of skips a little bit, and they were supposed to go on this trip together for their anniversary, and she of course gets caught up at work, and so he is there alone and ends up calling his mistress over early in the morning. He gets up and leaves, and next thing they know, the mistress is dead in his bed. And so it's this whole story and plot line trying to figure out who killed this person. Did he actually kill his mistress, or did someone else? Who was the other person? And the wife actually becomes his defense attorney. I will say that it does get quite interesting, but I don't feel like the author gives you enough clues to be able to figure out, which I guess is kind of the whole point, right? Like, you're not supposed to be able to know. But I just kind of, I guess, wished that I would have been able to follow along with the story a little bit better with how they were getting to where they were getting. But there wasn't a whole lot of, like, back monologue about how they got to the conclusions that they were getting to with trying to figure out this murder. And so I think I would rate that book a 3 stars because the ending fell really flat for me. Like, they kind of jump ahead a little bit and then it exposes who actually did it and the whole plot line. And I feel like, at least not that I picked up on, maybe some of you guys did, but there's no clues throughout the book that would have been able to lead me to that thought process that, oh, maybe this person was the one that did it. I just think that it fell a little flat for me as well, which is unfortunate because I was excited about that, and I've been trying to get into mystery thrillers, but I still have yet to find, like, well, actually, I take that back. 5 Survive by Holly Jackson. Chef's Kiss, like, I loved that book. If you haven't read it already, please do. If you have, let me know what your thoughts are on that book and how you read it, because I ended up reading it in the sit down and binge it for 8 hours perspective. But anyways, other than that, like, I feel like I've been having a really hard time finding good mystery thrillers that actually keep me on the edge of my seat. I feel like most of the mystery thrillers that I've read have just fell a little flat for me, so that's unfortunate. But if you have any good recommendations, actually, for good mystery thrillers that you love that didn't fall flat for you, did actually keep you on the edge of your seat for the entire time that you were reading it, please let me know in the comments below, because I would love to hear your guys' opinions on that. After The Perfect Marriage, I moved and I didn't read anything while we were moving. I picked up 2 last books that I've kind of read in the last week. You will see a realistic reading vlog come up soon as well that will go more into depth on these 2 books. But after that, I read You'll Be the Death of Me by Karen McManus. It's another mystery thriller YA book, and it follows 3 different characters, Mateo, Ivy, and Cal, and they skip school and find someone dead. Follow their 3 perspectives on trying to figure out who the murderer was, and everything is relating back to the school, and it's very fast-paced, easy to read, keeps you entertained the whole time. And so I ended up reading this a 3.5. The ending gets pretty twisty and you kind of see everything fall into place, and I liked how she also wrapped up the end of the book by kind of showing each character and how their lives are after they've solved this murder. I really appreciate when authors do that, so I would highly recommend this book. It's not a part of a series. I take that back. It's a standalone book. And I know that she has quite a few other books kind of similar to this one out there that I am looking forward to picking up sometime, hopefully in the near future. And the last book that I read in the month of March was Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. This book follows a mom as the main character. About 10 years ago from present times, her daughter ends up going missing. She was 15 and she just goes and disappears one day, and everyone is trying to figure out, like, well, did she just run away? You know, she had these big exams coming up. Maybe she was fearful about that, so she just ran away and didn't want to deal with it. Or, like, did she get kidnapped? Did she get murdered? Like, what is the situation? And so you follow this mom's perspective of how she's kind of trying to learn how to move on from this situation and how she was taking that and her thought processes on it. And it kind of gives you sometimes little snippets of the daughter's perspective around the time that she went missing. And I will say that you'll kind of see me rant about this in my other video, but I didn't love the writing style of this book. It's in third person and it's also set in London, so there's accents and different language usage, and just the way that there was also extra details that didn't necessarily need to be in there, and just kind of the way that it was written I didn't love. It took me a really long time, like probably to the halfway mark, to actually enjoy the book, if that makes sense. Like, I figured out what exactly happened very early on in the book, and so it was just a matter of reading about it and seeing the little details on how that happened, and I just didn't really enjoy it. I gave it a 3 stars. It was not my favorite book. It does get pretty twisty, I will say that, towards the end of the book, and once you kind of uncover the pieces, it does get pretty good, but not good enough to change my rating any higher than a 3, just because of the way that I guess it was written. So I don't know, take that with a grain of salt, I guess. And I will say that one thing that I did find to be very interesting about this book was towards the end, you know, it has like discussion questions. And so the first discussion question is, "Then she was gone is first and foremost a mystery, yet many questions are answered quite early on. How soon did you guess what really happened to Ellie, the daughter? And if you did it affect your enjoyment of the book?" And I figured out really early on, and I did think that that affected my enjoyment of the book. Like, it just kind of added on to the fact that I already wasn't enjoying the reading style, and then figuring out what happened so early on, I was like, oh, well, now I'm just reading to get the details of it, but I already know what happens. So, like, the second half of the book was just kind of reading to get through it and not quite as much trying to figure out what happened. So I think in that aspect, that's why it fell a little flat for me. But anyways, that concludes my recent wrap up and all of the books that I read for February and March. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have read any of these books, please let me know in the comments down below and kind of give me your thought processes on them, because I love seeing how everyone has a little different of a perspective towards different books. And also, if you have any recommendations for books that you want to see me hopefully read in the near future, leave a comment down below as well, just kind of letting me know your thoughts on those and why you'd recommend them. But otherwise, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you guys in my next video.